to the Fit for Privacy Podcast with Punit Bhatia. This is the podcast for those who care about their privacy. Here, your host, Punit Bhatia, has conversations with industry leaders about their perspectives, ideas, and opinions relating to privacy, data protection, and related matters. Be aware that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not legal advice. Let us get started.
So the EU GDPR is completing 4 years in a few days. And what's happening is between May 2018 and now May 2022, there are 4 years. And if we look at it since May 2016, when the law came into effect, of course, companies had 2 years. So we have completed 6 years. Now, I wanted to look back and reflect on different topics, what has happened, what has not happened, and so on. And then my friend Jockish, you know him, he's a privacy researcher, he's a privacy consultant just like me. And he's very knowledgeable. He has lots of data sets around podcast, around the privacy laws, and so on. And I thought, let's have an impromptu conversation. So this is not pre-discussed, this is not pre-planned. Yes, his company is PrivacyPlan, but this is without any plan. And we are thinking of brainstorming together and listing out, trying to come up with 5, maybe say 10 key moments which in last 5 or 6 years have defined privacy, and also come up with at least 3 to 5 looking forward, saying what are the things that will shape. So what we will do is we will have a conversation, list out a few things, and then rank them and see. So welcome, Jeff, to this impromptu conversation, and thanks for agreeing to do this.
Thanks, Punit. It's good to be here today. I think this is a great idea to try to come up with the different inflection points that we've seen in the privacy landscape over the past couple of years.
Indeed, and I think you really notice normally I'm in a suit and everything in a formal meaning, but this is a casual conversation, you and me in a t-shirt and just trying to be two friends talking, let's put it like that. So
maybe I'm definitely on the casual end of the spectrum here today.
Yeah, so let's do an alternative, saying I throw something, you throw something, I make a list, and then we put them in an order. Try to come up with 5 to 10 key inflection or key moments of attention that we have. And we don't need to Google it. Of course, we do have the access to research it, background in parallel, but that'll be too fast, I would say. So my key moment is, if I look at last 5-6 years, just to kick off the conversation, is the number of privacy laws that have come up. So the GDPR has kind of kicked off how do I say, a sequence or a trigger of multiple laws across the globe. So that's what I would say as a first thing. Of course, we will rank them later.
Sure.
Privacy laws, what would be yours?
Well, certainly after GDPR, the thing that first comes to mind right after that is CCPA, because as influential as GDPR was, if it hadn't really been cemented in U.S. jurisprudence with something resembling those kinds of privacy rights with CCPA, I think it probably would be a far different place right now than it was. But California really stepped up to the plate and put in the first comprehensive state law with CCPA, and it really is sort of made the U.S. The other states sort of take note. Right now we have 5 U.S. state laws as of yesterday, I think, right? I think Connecticut's governor signed the Connecticut Privacy Act. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. So that thing that the GDPR started is rolling downhill, not only internationally, but in the United States.
Indeed. And I think that's indeed a key moment. And if we look at the privacy law landscape in the United States, CCPA was certainly the trigger, and it was triggered based on what happened in the EU in GDPR context. And it is shaping up or setting the foundation, setting the scene for how privacy is perceived, how privacy is complied, or even how companies look at privacy in context of the US companies, or especially California being what do we say, the hub of Silicon Valley, or the origin of Silicon Valley. So those companies are also starting to pay attention to privacy. Indeed. So this time, would you like to start, or I mean, as we are collecting some ideas, we have two already.
Go ahead. You can do the next.
So if I look at it, I think it has helped put privacy as a board topic, because it originally used to be a back end topic for lawyers and saying they were seeking attention, and now all of a sudden the board is saying we want to establish trust, we want to talk about ethics, we want to talk about CCPA, we want to talk about GDPR, and how do we protect ourselves against this. So I think it has helped put this as a topic which is on the board level. So privacy has become a board level conversation, and if I see it evolving, you're having some companies talking about. I was in a conference in Milan earlier this week, and we were talking about the advanced companies putting it not as a privacy role but as a trust role. So the TPO or privacy CPO role, the chief privacy officer role, would eventually expand into chief trust officer eventually. And I do know of some companies, and I have some friends who have the title chief trust officer. So it has become a board topic, and it is moving goalpost from purely privacy and data protection to trust and customer experience dimension. That's a big shift, and that's because of the privacy laws, or the 5 6 years of GDPR and whatever we say privacy regime.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of conversation about that. Where does privacy really fit in organizations? Is it part of IT? Is it part of legal? And at the same time, you have organizations building these other new functionalities, trust and diversity and governance and ESG and DEI. So I think it's an evolving thing, and where it lands is probably up in the air, because I think you're right. It's something that is getting bigger, not smaller, right? It's got to be a larger portion of the way people think about how their organizations act. And maybe we don't even call it privacy in the future. Maybe you're right. Maybe it evolves into something like trust.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad we find agreement. And anything else you think would be a key inflection or reflection moment for last few years?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that I might bring up. I think the rise of ransomware and events like the Colonial Pipeline that really put it into the American consumer's mind, even though that's fading pretty fast because they've got a short memory. I think that really has influenced people's thought processes about privacy, and legislators' response there too, right? Even though we really haven't made a hell of a lot of progress in the United States, there's been a lot of talk about how we should respond to data breaches.
Yeah. And I think that's very true, because sometimes people tend to ignore or underplay privacy. But when the ransomware attacks happen, and especially for those people who lost out on some tangible, let's say, financial impact on them, rather than just losing out on data, like we had this Yahoo data breach, or we had this couple of other data breach, Marriott data breach, in which payment data was compromised. And when those people have had a few transactions against their name, and or the ransomware has led to some data being stolen, and they have had an impact, people do start talking about, what about my privacy, how is my data protected? That has another thing been, and then suddenly it links back to saying, yes, there is a law and they didn't take care of my data. What are they doing? Are they compliant? So you're right, that's another aspect. So if I continue in that sense, and of course I see our perspectives are based on where we are. So you are in the US, so you're bringing that perspective, and I continue to bring the EU perspective. So when I see, I think between the US and EU, we also had this invalidation of privacy shield, or the data transfers as we call it.
Yep.
And that is a huge topic. And I think that's a little bit of a mess, if I may call it, because we do want to solve it, and you, me, or companies cannot solve it. And at the moment, the regulators or the government have to solve it. It's not even for the regulator; it's for the government to first fix it. Then the regulator can do something, and we can help the companies. But at the moment, we tell the companies saying there is a risk. Here's the risk. Please accept the risk. The board says you are the DPO, you are the privacy professional. What do you say? So there's a ping pong. And then the regulator says you manage the risk, do a risk assessment. I mean, what will the risk assessment yield in? The same thing which is for every one of us. So there's a little bit of everyone pushing the other party and saying you are responsible, but apparently it's uh, it's everyone's responsibility. And when it's everyone's responsibility, we all say to the board, no one is responsible, no one is taking ownership. So I would say this privacy shield invalidation, and the consequence being the data transfers situation, especially between the across Atlantic situation, I would say US and the EU.
Yeah, I think you've hit a very big one. I was going to bring that one up at some point, and
Okay.
and I think you're right. It's huge, and it's ongoing, right? It wasn't a point in time. It's an ongoing event. And the North Atlantic, not North Atlantic, is that what it's called? The treaty that the EU and the Biden administration have proposed, that I guess is a treaty in principle, to try to resolve this mess. It's actually pretty interesting. I'm hopeful that it'll actually work. The details obviously matter a great deal, but this new review board that they've proposed seems like it could actually work. I guess I'm probably more of an optimist than many privacy advocates are, but it seems to me that it could address the concerns of the court, that overturned the privacy shield in the Schrems decision. So I'm optimistic that could give us at least a few years of adequacy to do some data transfers, because I think the privacy shield concept in general is pretty reasonable. It's done some good things. Is it as good as having a strong privacy law in the United States? No, of course not. But it's a reasonable stopgap measure, assuming it actually works.
Yeah, I think again, it's not about the law in the US, but as we all know, it's more around having adequate protection. And the laws in US are such, and especially because of the Twin Tower attack and some other activities or events, that there is a government possibility of asking for data, and the companies have to comply. Of course, we know the Apple story, that they refuse to comply. And that's where the concern is the data sufficiently protected, or can anyone extract anything? And that's the concern, and that's a fair concern. It doesn't have to be addressed through law, but it has to be addressed at a government level. And as you rightly say, I'm also optimistic, because the moment conversation starts, the possibility of a solution increases, and the moment conversation stops, the possibility stops. So there is a possibility, there is an opportunity to find a solution. And if it was easy, they would have found a solution already. But again, it's challenging, and it will take time before they find the solution.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize is, right, it's not that GDPR and the Europeans are saying that there can't be surveillance of information to fight terrorism. They're saying that there has to be citizen redress of that process.
Yeah.
And that's all this is really about, right?
Indeed.
So, it seems to me that there can be adequate redress if we just build those processes.
Yeah. And I think if we just want to deviate and a little bit on a casual note, I mean, last week, Putin's girlfriend was sanctioned for some of her assets in the EU. Now, is that fair? Is that not fair? Is that breach of privacy? Is that not? Now, those are debatable topics, but there the stakes are very high. So we say it's the right thing to do, or most of us say it's the right thing to do. But for a common citizen, or somebody who is uh, who's not so having stakes at a state level, like here there's a state premier who has a girlfriend, and that's how there's a war. So the stakes are very high and we don't talk about it. But eventually, if it's my credit card and that data gets stolen because of something, then is it against privacy? So it is something that needs to be solved. Of course, I'm taking a very extreme view on both sides.
Yeah.
The other thing I would think is there've also been, if you see a chat about or talk about ethics when we talk about privacy, because now people are not saying there is a law or not. We typically say privacy is also an ethical issue. We should do it, we should take care of it, even if there is no law, because that's the right thing to do. And that's also because of the events on privacy in the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot more of that. Almost, from a corporate perspective, I'm seeing that because uh, companies need to act in a way that they can, they can't respond to every single privacy law across every single jurisdiction. They have to have some sort of sanity, right, in how they process data. And in order to do that, they have to level set someplace, right? And if the laws are here in one place and here in another place, it doesn't really make sense, right, for them to try to geotag every single consumer, right, so that they can process it in this way over here and this way over here, right? What really makes sense, right, is to process it, in the same way across the world, right, or across the geography that they do business in, right? And so in order to do that, really the best way, the easiest way, right, is to say, okay, well, let's have some ethical view of our data that's in at this particular level and process everybody the same way. Now,
Yeah.
it's even better if we can say, hey, we have standards, we have privacy, as an advantage, we have morals, we have ethics, and here's what they are, and use that as a competitive advantage as well.
Indeed. I think that's also links to the other aspect which I was missing on, that there have now been quantifiable data reports saying, and you manage data sets, so you know more than me, that now that we are 4, 5 years in, there is research and there is evidence that when you make investments in privacy, it has impact on business in a positive way, in the sense you are better aware of your data sets, you are better aware of your data, you can do better analytics, you are more aware of uh, the data. That means you are able to better manage data breaches because you're talking about technical and organizational measures. And since you are doing privacy compliance, you are also talking about, is this data necessary, is this proportionate to the need, do we really need to give it to the marketing team, do we need to really share it outside? So all that is enhancing, what I can say broadly speaking, culture of privacy or benefits on privacy.
Yeah. Well, there's another advantage too, Punit, and that is whenever you have to fix your systems, to re-engineer systems to add privacy, it's extremely expensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you level set here, right, to have a higher level of privacy, then
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to tweak your system every time this law changes and this law changes and this law changes, right? Because you're already up here. So you've made one fix instead of, fixes every time laws change in multiple different places, because that's extremely expensive, even if you're only making, legal changes. But if you have to make technical changes, my God, that's expensive.
Yeah. And I think those expenses are getting paid back. That's the research that now shows. And that creates confidence, because earlier it was avoidance of fines, and now it's basically gaining those benefits, gaining those operational efficiencies and the trust aspect. Because the research is amazing when it says that companies that invest in privacy are trusted more, companies that demonstrate privacy. I mean, we talk about often Apple. If we say Apple, Google, Meta, and Microsoft, we usually hold Apple in better position, because we How or why? Because they have been at the forefront of saying this is what we do on privacy, this is how we protect your privacy. And of course they've rolled out some features and some ads to grab attention on that, but essentially it is leveraging upon the privacy and demonstrating you are sincere about privacy, rather than saying we are compliant with EU GDPR or CCPA. They don't say that. They say we care for your privacy, and they don't talk about in EU, in US, or in California. They talk generally that our products are more respecting your privacy.
Yeah.
That's another trend or another shift that we've seen.
Yeah. Related to that, I think the next shift that we should talk about is location data, because that is a huge problem right now, and it's becoming very, I guess it's getting into the public zeitgeist now, that location data is a problem. I was actually just reading a report today about how data brokers have been selling data that make it that allow people to track individuals who have visited abortion centers, right? Which is obviously pretty scary to those individuals. And that's just sort of one little anecdote, right? But location data is extremely sensitive data, and people give it away all the time through not setting and configuring their privacy in applications that are collecting it, often in pretty illegal ways. But we give that information away all the time, and people haven't realized until recently how sensitive location data is, because it's very easy to identify people through their location. It only takes like 4 pieces of spatiotemporal data, location data with a timestamp, to identify an American with 95% certainty. So, if you've got a stream of location data about me from a weather application, you can damn sure know exactly who I am. Yeah, it's easy, right? Even if that information is, quote, de-identified, it's very easy to figure out who that person is. And there's been plenty of reports that show that you can figure out, who people are in Congress, who soldiers are, who special forces people are, just by grabbing mass location data from these data brokers, and backtracing that information. And it's scary how dangerous that is for individuals and, frankly, for national security.
Indeed, and I think in context of a war, if somebody gets access to that data, you can easily identify who are the people, where are they moving, what are they doing. And if you get access to that real time, which is basically hacking into your satellite systems and finding out where the people or soldiers are moving, that is pretty scary.
Yeah, there was actually some report that that people are tracking Russian soldiers in that way right now, so that they can see what's going on in the Ukraine. So, it can work beneficially or the reverse, right? But depending on whose side you're on, I guess, right? But it's extremely dangerous information.
Absolutely. I think whether it's technology or data, there are both sides. There's the advantage side of it, and there's the disadvantage when it's misused. And the misuse is where we have to guard against. And that's why the laws or the ethics or all those elements, data protection or even security measures come in. But in these cases, since the benefits are so high because of location data, I mean, of course, you can use it positively if you have an old age home and so you have asked somebody to go out, you can track them, keep track of them if they're not mentally fit or something like that. But the stakes are high even in the other side when it's misused. So the stakes, the benefits and the risks are very, very high in this case. But moving on with the conversation, I was thinking through, and I think the Chinese data protection law or the bill would also be one of the shift moments in this, the data privacy world. And it's, I would think, triggered based on the GDPR and the CCP and the other 140 laws that have come up because of EU GDPR, or triggered because of that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a seminal change. I haven't studied it nearly as deeply as I should, but the fact that China was able to pass this so quickly, and before a lot of other countries, including the United States, is significant. And frankly, it's a very strong law for consumer privacy. Of course, it doesn't really keep the Chinese government from collecting a lot of information and processing information, but it does keep businesses from processing the personal information of a lot of Chinese citizens without a lot of processes very similar to GDPR, right? And it also imposes some localization and data transfer rules. And I think there's still a lot of fact finding and translation issues that companies are trying to figure out exactly how all that's going to shake out. But it's substantial.
It is. And I think there are both sides. Yes, it's a strong law in context of the fact that there was nothing or very limited in terms of the legislation. But again, given the trend, given the actions, given the past record, people are also skeptical as regards how far would it be implemented and how strictly it would be enforced. So there is an interesting period coming up next 5 years on how far we will go or China would go in implementing this.
Yeah.
So you won't realize we've done 9 items already. So what would be your 10th and final, maybe?
Well, it has to be. And I think this is a huge one as well. And frankly, it could even extend into China, is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
In fact, China just passed an artificial intelligence law. Um, but artificial intelligence in general is a huge part of privacy because a lot of our personal data gets involved in these artificial intelligence algorithms. And how we handle that in the future is extremely important because when you mix personal data with artificial intelligence, it hides a lot of the details of what might be going on. Artificial intelligence is sort of by default a black box. You put a bunch of data into it, and out comes the decision. And you can, if you force it, understand sort of what's happening there. That's called explainability.
Mhm.
But by default, most of those artificial intelligence algorithms don't give you a lot of explainability. And unless we sort of force companies to add explainability to the mix, you don't really know what the heck's going on. And sometimes these companies don't even look for that explainability. They're actually looking for an algorithm that has high accuracy. And often that accuracy comes at the expense of the explainability. Maybe I'm not explaining that particularly well. You want to add some color there, Punit?
I would agree with you. I think the AI regulation or the talk about AI needs to be regulated is also similar to what was the talk 10 years ago about privacy needs to be regulated more because there was proliferation of data and now there's proliferation of automatic or robotic decisions. And the question is, how do you define artificial intelligence? Because uh, for me, it's as simple as any decision that's made by a non-human, any machine, even if it is a decision of saying we are talking and the automatic feed has started which says yes, you can watch the podcast now. It happened automatically, and that's an automatic decision, so that's artificial intelligence. It just detects and does it. And but if it's a simple decision, doesn't impact humans, that's okay. But we don't want to be ending up in a situation like scientific fiction movies, that the robots have taken control of the earth and nobody knows how to get control of. So that's where what you mentioned, explainability, comes in. That whatever logic you are putting in, you are able to explain what is it, and you are keeping in the means to intervene and control, because you don't want Tom Cruise or Jack, anyone, Nicolas Cage, to come in and protect us. You want that functionality, that opportunity to get in and understand what the code is and how to intervene. Because if there's no loophole and the artificial intelligence continues to become more and more intelligent, and then we as humans have lost control, that is not the way it is. So explainability and the ability to intervene and intercept is very, very important. And that's again a shift we are having in context of how the world will move.
Yeah.
So we have 10,
Yeah. That's 10.
so I don't think we need to go deep into other things. But now if we look forward, so we have, I mean, just to recap, so we talked about proliferation of privacy laws, the CCPA, then it has become a board topic, and we also talked about the risk of ransomware, and then the privacy shield or standard contractual clauses, ethics, and the culture or the benefits part of it, the location data risks, the Chinese data protection bill, and the AI. Of course, when I just was reading it, I had a feeling maybe we could have talked about the risk, where the concerns around privacy in context of pandemic, but we all know that, and we are glad that things are easing out. So let's not unnecessarily talk about the pandemic. But if we look forward next 3 years, what would be one or two things you will see as a future trend or the future of privacy as we see?
Um, there's lots of things that we could go, lots of directions we can go there. I think that we have to deal with biometric data and understand those risks better. That's sort of wrapped up in identity, which I think is sort of a big issue for me.
Yeah, identity, and more importantly, I would say synthetic identity as it's coming up. Because earlier we were talking about identity, and with biometric and identity and some of the AI, it's converging into synthetic identity or synthetic data, and that's a bigger challenge in my view.
Yeah. Right now, everybody is trying to move to new ways to do authentication and understanding people's identity. And, biometric authentication, I think, is a bad way to do it. Partially because if somebody steals your biometric information, then they can become you.
Yeah.
It's just a sort of a scary proposition because you can't go change your face. You can't change your DNA. You can't change your fingerprints, right? You can change your password, and you can change your other ways that we do authentication, but you can't change your biometrics. And so I think that biometric authentication, while it's easy and painless and fast, is the wrong direction for authentication. We need to do something different. At least that's my take on it. And identity becomes a much bigger problem. I think we need to go down a path where we're doing self-sovereign identity. But the problem there is getting to that point where we have self-sovereign identity in some kind of a wallet that we can control. And we've got all kinds of governments and businesses like Google and Apple and other folks, MasterCard and Visa, right, that want to sort of control those identity planes. And so they have the ability to potentially roll these things out. And while that's helpful to maybe get us there, if they're the ones who are actually controlling these wallets, I'm not sure if that's the best thing for consumer privacy.
No, I think identity management, or how we identify people in a less intrusive and more strong or authentic way, would be one of the topics that will determine how privacy is protected in coming years. I can follow that, and I can agree with that. In fact, I would like to say that privacy laws would keep on coming, but I think if 140 countries have passed a law, then majority of them have passed a law. It's about the remaining. So I can't say privacy laws would continue, but I would say the talk about privacy and privacy being relevant would continue, because the world would become more and more digital. There would be more AI, there would be more say wars, hopefully not, but when they happen, there will be more talk about it and more digitization. So there will be talk about privacy on an ongoing basis if I see next 5 years as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. This is not going to go away. I think people have sort of woken. If you want to talk about like woke culture, people have woken up to privacy. Maybe there's still a large portion of people that are saying, okay, well, yeah, I understand privacy is important, but I'm not changing my behavior yet. But I think more and more of that is going to go away. That more and more people are going to understand that privacy is important enough to actually change behavior. Because I think they're seeing that it's having an actual impact on them, whether that's financially or in terms of people trying to manipulate them, that they feel that that's happening. And so I think people are going to take privacy more seriously in the coming years.
I would agree with that. And I think that seems like, in terms of the time, in terms of the conversation, the right moment also to end it. Because we talked about the 10 shifts that have happened in the privacy field. We talked about the two things, one each, on how we see privacy going forward, about the future of privacy. And the way you summarized it, that it impacts the person or the individual whose personal data we are talking about, is the right moment. And I would say, Jeff, uh, unless you have something really urgent to add, thank you so much, because it was a wonderful conversation. And I think I can do more podcasts like this than doing the planning and everything.
I like it. Thanks for having me, Punit.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Have a great day.
You too.
Fit for Privacy helps you to create a culture of privacy and manage risks by creating, defining, and implementing a privacy strategy that includes delivering scenario-based training for your staff. We also help those who are looking to get certified in CIPPE, CIPM, and CIPT through on-demand courses that help you prepare and practice for certification exam. Want to know more? Visit www.fit4privacy.com. That's www.FIT4privacy.com. Thanks for listening. If you liked the show, feel free to share it with a friend and write a review. If you have already done so, thank you so much. And if you did not like the show, don't bother and forget about it. Take care and stay safe. Until next time, goodbye. If you have questions or suggestions, feel free to drop an email at hello@fit4privacy.com. That's hello@FIT4privacy.com.